everyone. I welcome you all to the next guest session under the Founders in Honor initiative by the Entrepreneurship Club of the Placement Cell SRCC. This club is dedicated to stimulating entrepreneurial learning and providing enhanced opportunities through action and experience. Today, we are delighted and honored to have with us Mr. Karan Bajaj, the founder of White Hat Junior, a company established in 2018 with a vision of making children creators of technology rather than being its passive consumers. In August 2020, Mr. Karan joined hands with Byju's, the world's most valuable edtech company, to further accelerate his vision. A graduate of IIM Bangalore, Mr. Karan has earlier served as the CEO for Discovery South Asia and been associated with companies like P&G, BCG, and Kraft's Food Group in the past. He has also written 3 best-selling novels so far, which have been published by renowned media houses like HarperCollins and Penguin. We welcome you, sir.
Pleasure to be here, Manya. Thank you for having me.
I would now like to walk you through the structure of the interview. It would be divided into 3 sections. The first section would deal with questions related to your organization. The next one would be a rapid fire, and the last section would contain some closing questions.
Sounds great.
We start with the interview now. So the first question that I have for you, sir, is what inspired you to start the company and how did you come up with the name of White Hat Junior?
White Hat Junior started with a very singular idea that kids should be builders and creators. That's their natural destiny. And coding would allow them to take their ideas and build and create out of that. And the idea came because there's some very interesting research around how kids actually peak in creativity at age 5. When they're in age 5, they test at the top 99th percentile of creativity. And by the time they hit age 30, they test in the bottom 2 percentile of creativity. So what happens is that as more and more rules and systems enter your life, your creativity keeps going down. And the idea was that kids should never lose that fountainhead of creativity that they have. That was the idea behind White Hat Junior. And the name came from, we started with coding, and White Hat was is an ethical hacker. So the idea of a White Hat Junior was that kids would have fun and create and build and become hackers who enjoy building and creating things. So that's how the name came.
I would like to know that is there any specific reason behind you choosing this particular sector for your organization?
Yes. So the specific reason is that if you look at the White Hat Junior model, there is a student and then there is a teacher and a one-on-one live class. So if you compare it to like a school learning, there is one teacher and 30, 40 students, and everybody's being put through the same curriculum. As a result, their input and output, you give the same input, obviously the output ends up becoming very similar. In the whole idea of White Hat Junior was that creativity is not a mass production ecosystem. It has to be personalized. So that's why you had one teacher for one student. And I chose this because I thought only in India could a company be created in which you could have one teacher for one student, because there are so many educated, qualified women in India who are not currently a part of the workforce, who could, via this model, come back into the workforce. And that's what happened. Since the launch of the company, we have more than 12,000 teachers and, making a full-time salary out of White Hat Junior. And now 1,000 teachers in Brazil and Mexico as well. And they've all women who are very qualified, very educated, who came back into the workforce because of this one-on-one teaching. So that's why I wanted to work in this sector, because I thought I'd be able to leverage the power of these women and get them back into the workforce, right, through that, or be an enabler to get them back into the workforce through this. Yeah.
Moving on, what were the challenges that you faced in the course of establishing your organization, and how did you overcome them? What were the driving force behind it?
Yeah, so the challenges, what happens in an entrepreneurial journey is that the challenges change. I think of the entrepreneurial journey as 3 phases. The 0 to 1 phase is where the founder has to be very obsessed about the product. Even as they are setting up the rest of the organization, they have to be very detail oriented in making sure that the product is really right for the user. Once they are able to successfully navigate that, where almost 90% of entrepreneurs actually fail, right? Because they're not able to create a product that users love. Then you enter the 1 to 100 phase, which is all about being able to scale business systems, hiring the right people, the right leadership team under you, setting up operations and systems that scale the organization. And then the 100 to 1,000 phase, your journey changes again, and you become a person who really navigates the cultures and values of the company, who creates the cultures and values that can scale across thousands of people in the organization. So the founder's role changes, and they have to adapt to these phases in lightning quick speed. So for example, it took me 6 months in the 0 to 1 phase, maybe another 6 months in the 1 to 100 phase, and I was already in the 100 to 1,000 phase. So you have to kind of switch roles from being a product manager to like a business leader to a cultures and values person very, very rapidly. And I think that's always a little hard to adopt to. And I think that's the main role, I would say.
The entrepreneur needs to be in every field. He cannot restrict himself to one thing.
Correct. Yeah. I have to completely make changes very rapidly.
Moving on to the next question, I would like to ask you, how do you take out time for yourself amidst the hectic work schedule, and how important do you think it is to have hobbies and interests?
See, I do only one thing at a time very well, and then I just do that very deeply. So I'm not the best person for work-life balance, but the way I manage my work-life balance is that I just do different things at different points. So when I'm building a startup, I just build a startup. But then when I'm writing a novel, I just write a novel. When I'm doing yoga, I just take all my time. Like I'm taking one whole year to live in an ashram and do yoga. So I've had like multiple chapters in my life. I just think that one person can just do one thing very well at a time, and they should just do that well, and then have like enough kind of mental and spiritual stability while you're doing that one thing, whether that's your family or your yoga, meditation, exercise, whatever practices that can allow you to just function very well in the one thing. But doing 2 or 3 different things, I don't think I'd be able to do a startup and write a novel and manage too many things. So I just do a startup right now, and then I'm able to spend time with my family, but I'm just able to do one thing well. The good thing about life is that I think for like young people like you, life does allow you to do a lot of different things, right? Like I've like written novels, and I've like, worked and run a startup and taken a lot of time to do like yoga full time. So life allows you over a long period of time, you're able to do everything. So I think just doing one thing well at a time is a good recipe.
I think a few of us would definitely agree, because we are not definitely the multitaskers one, and really like to have one task at a time.
Yeah.
What piece of advice would you give to college students who wish to build an organization from scratch?
I think you should build something in college, not necessarily a company, but whether you write a novel or I guess, I don't know, start a new club in SRCC from scratch, or the act of building something teaches you a lot. You learn how to birth an idea, you learn how to nurture it, you learn how to align people to the vision, you learn failure and rejection. The more, the earlier your creative, like a big creative activity enters your life, the more meaningful it will become to become an entrepreneur later, because you'll kind of, you'll build the creation muscle, if you will.
It's definitely a long process.
Yes.
Now we'll move on to this next section of the interview, which would be a rapid fire round. I would start. The first question that I have is, what would you say are the top 3 skills needed to be a successful entrepreneur or an organizational leader?
I think just 2, I would say, which is very, very strong vision coupled with very, very detail orientation. So a good founder, in my opinion, has a clear vision of where they're going 3 years, but they're also obsessed with the details in the complete immediate future. So they should be obsessed about the template of the email color, right? And yet they should have a vision. So they should have the unique ability to be both macro and micro. If they're not macro, the company flounders. If they're not micro, the company loses its detail orientation. Yeah.
The next question that we have is, if you were to write a book about you and your organization, what would you name it? If you had to come up with 3 words to describe the culture you want to create, what would they be?
It would be an owner, not a renter. So like I would say the value that I think is dearest in the organization is that when you are a part of our company, you own the company fully as an owner, and the company in turn also respects that and allows extraordinary or ensures extraordinary growth for you as an individual, whether that be in promotion, salaries, etc. If you are owning the company, and we want everybody to be an owner whose value appreciates as the value of the asset appreciates, right? We don't want renters in the organization who are coming for a period of time, working for a salary and then leaving. So I would say, yeah, that would be the most enduring value of the company, that like anybody who joins us should be an owner, not a renter. And then in turn, the company has a responsibility of treating them like an owner. And if the value of the asset appreciates, the owner's value should appreciate accordingly. Yeah.
Moving on to the next question. Please mention some industries which you feel would be booming in the future and the youth should focus on them.
I think entrepreneurs should just start with an idea rather than an industry, in my assessment, right? If you're passionate about an idea, industries keep going in and out of favor. When I started in edtech was not a story, right? Like edtech was known for low margins, very large, long time frames before exits. It wasn't like a success story. Now suddenly the pandemic happened and it became a success story. It'll fall out of favor. I think sectors fall in and out of favor. I think powerful ideas always exist, right? As Google was the 12th search engine to launch, right? Like search was not an industry until Google came as the 12th search engine and made that such a like industry, right? So I think, yeah. So I think
it really fits the code.
Ideas, not sectors. Yeah.
Yeah, I think really fits the code that change is the only constant here.
Correct.
What are the must-read books for a college student?
I would read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, which is about like a Nazi camp survivor who gives a very good indication of what really, how do some people survive tough times because they have some purpose that drives them. So I think it's very, very good to kind of formulate your view about your life at this stage. Yeah.
That brings us to the end of the second section. Now we'll be moving to the closing questions.
Sure.
The first question that I have is, if you had the chance to start your career over again, is there anything that you would do differently?
As I said, I would just create things early. So I think from my college, after IIM Bangalore and writing my first novel, there was a 6-year gap. Right in that period, I was just employee of an organization, Procter & Gamble in that case, like working hard, working well. But I should have built something on the side. I think building things teaches you a lot about act of creations that can scale later. You learn about like building, failure, how to have the raw metal to kind of take something from 0 to 1. That's very important. I wish I would have done that earlier.
The next question that I have for you is, where do you see your company in the next 5 years?
5 years is a good horizon where right now, if you look at Whitehead Junior, it's in 7 countries, India, US, Australia, UK, Brazil, Mexico, Indonesia. It's in multiple courses. We do coding, maths. We've just launched music. And then it's in multiple formats right now, which is live teaching, business to business school. I think we are expecting in the next 5 years to become very ubiquitous. We are the only ones who are doing live learning in the world, like one teacher to one student at this scale. We think that everybody who goes through that model is like transformed by the learning. And so I think our kind of mission in the next 5 years is that 1 in 3 kids in the world should touch the product, and we create 100,000 women teaching jobs in India.
That was great to hear. Thank you so much for sharing your journey and experience, and also for such insightful answers. I really hope that all the viewers take these into account for their entrepreneurship venture, or it really inspires them to take up this field. With this, we officially come to the end of this interview. We would like to thank you for taking out time from your busy schedule for this interview. We really look forward to connecting with you in future as well. And we hope that Whitehead Junior touches greater heights, and wish you the very best for the scene.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Completely my pleasure. Thank you.